Super excited to be joined by Jadyn Watson-Fisher of the News and Observer. Jadyn, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
So I know it's a busy time now. We're getting to that fall season. It's starting to feel like fall here in Syracuse. Got a little bit of football, and then we're getting some basketball too. So how's this football season been treating you so far?
Well, I'll be honest, it hasn't been as good as we were hoping. But I mean, it is what it is. We're still trucking along. So
Yeah, and of course the big news with NC State, their quarterback Grayson McCall did get that severe injury over the weekend. Any initial update on how he's doing? Of course, ruled out for the year, but any update on just what his condition is after that injury?
so they have not actually ruled him out, which is kind of crazy. Um, he was allegedly at practice this week, not doing anything, but he was there. Um, Dave Doran said they're letting him go through concussion protocol, and he's kind of just letting the doctors, McCall and his family, kind of make those decisions over the next couple of weeks. But man, it was a scary sight because it wasn't just helmet to helmet. When his came off, there was contact with his bare head with Wake Forest defenders, and man, that would scare me personally. I don't know if I would ever do a sport again after that, but I mean, he seems to be in good spirits.
That's definitely good to hear. And his replacement, CJ Bailey, he's gotten some reps this season early on. What have you seen from him, and can he be that QB1 going forward for the Wolfpack?
I really like CJ. Obviously he's a freshman, so he doesn't have the same um level of playing experience, but from what I've seen, like he looks really confident. Like he's not afraid to take some, crazy passes. He's not afraid to take off and run. And because he's 6'6", he might not be the fastest guy. Um, but as a ball carrier, he makes up for it with his legs and like his general length. Um, and he loves learning from what I can tell. He's not afraid to be coached. He's down for just about anything. I remember after the Clemson game where he actually got sacked a couple times, and he was like, honestly, it was so fun taking the contact. And I just think his overall demeanor does put him in a great position to lead the offense.
It's been an offense and a team this year that had a lot of expectations at the start of it. They were ranked, but they're at a 500 record now. What has not necessarily gone wrong, but what's been the problems for NC State in really not living up to those high expectations that they had in the beginning of the year?
Consistency at 100%, because they've had some incredible periods where they're throwing the ball, they're running well, they're blocking well, and then it just kind of falls apart. And the same thing on defense and special teams is like, okay, well, we've got our veteran punter who is, kicking for 50 something yards a punt in a game, and then the next it's like 30 something yards. And that's really abnormal to see this level of inconsistency in all three phases. Um, and I think you saw it against Wake Forest. I think you saw it against NIU. Uh, they have the pieces, they have the talent. It's baffling, really, to not see it all come together yet.
And do you think there's one really key issue in why it hasn't come together, or is it just that it just isn't consistent week to week?
I think it's, yeah, because some weeks the offense will do okay. Some weeks the defense will do okay. But it's never been all three like really strong. I think the Northern Illinois game might have been the best, but the offense still wasn't quite there. Like they pulled it off, but I don't, they had like what, 200 something total yards of offense. Like that's not going to get it done. Um so yeah, it's made my life a little bit difficult trying to figure out what's going to happen.
And then honing in on that offense, I noticed first quarters, that tends to be an issue
Mm-hmm.
for them. It's a blowout by the end of the first quarter. That's a, big scoring margin by the end of the first quarter. Is that, an area where you're looking at and saying, this is probably an issue, or is that just kind of a greater problem with the consistency and the first quarter stuff isn't really a factor?
Oh, I no, the first quarter is absolutely a factor because I they've played behind in the majority of their games. And that strains every area of your game plan when you're trying to fight from behind. Um, and what was it? I think Northern Illinois again was the first game where they were not behind in the first quarter. And that's just not a recipe for success. And then, I mean, like you saw against Clemson, where they gave up 28 in a quarter, which was second most, I think, in program history for an opponent. So, yeah, it's a problem. They got to figure it out. Otherwise, the rest of the season's going to be really ugly.
And then looking elsewhere on that offense, the running backs. They've used two running backs, Kendrick Raphael and Jordan Waters. Both have been kind of a dynamic threat. Is there one you see them leaning towards more towards this, middle part end of this season, or do they like to roll with both?
They definitely like to roll with both. Um, and we've seen, again, we've seen flashes of really great stuff from both of them, and then we've seen them get stuffed at the line of scrimmage for, a loss. And I literally am sitting in the press box regularly being like, what are we doing? So I don't think we're gonna see any major changes in that area. I do know Hollywood Smothers was practicing this week, so that may give them a little bit more to play with. He seems to be a little bit more dynamic as opposed to the other two, who are a little bit more just like big bodies. Um, but we'll see. He's been out for a couple weeks, and Dave doesn't like to talk about injuries, so I don't actually know how severe things were.
Of those, those in the running back room, is there one that you think they should lean on more that fits their style of offense more, or is it just, seeing who's going to be better that certain to game day?
Mm, I actually do think Hollywood Smothers is the better one for at least in your offensive progression. You're trying to get downfield, you're trying to move the ball. He just seems in general to be the guy who can do that. Now, Jordan Waters seems to have sort of found a little bit more of that again. Um, so I mean, maybe with his leadership, but before the injury, Hollywood was the guy that I was like, okay, we need to stop running these other two unless we're like at the the 2 yard line and trying to get the ball in the end zone. Otherwise, I just was not convinced. So yeah, he's my guy, and no, it is not because he came from Oklahoma, which is where I am from.
And then looking elsewhere on that offense, the big wideout target, KC Concepcion, really skillful wide receivers, off to a really strong year. What makes him such a dynamic threat for NC State?
I mean, he's just able to make plays. We've seen some where, maybe it's not the best thrown ball, but he's able to haul it in. He can run a variety of routes, confidently. Um, but I'll actually say that he has not had the year that a lot of people were expecting. I feel like he has been a really good, relatively consistent receiver. But has he taken a step up from year one? I don't think so. I actually think he was better last year. Um, and Justin Jolie, who technically is not listed as a receiver, he has been, I think, more consistent in some of those bigger plays. They've really gone to KC, and this might be a play calling thing. So I may be wrongfully criticizing him. I think they've gone to him on a lot of jet sweeps instead of just, you know, very few fade routes or anything like that. So I'm wondering if it's from above, like if that's the issue. Um, because yeah, he's a really good player, but I just have not been quite as impressed with him this year.
Do you think maybe it's because of the, two quarterbacks that he hasn't really found a rhythm with one of the QBs, or is it more of a just a personal thing that he's not been performing to his expectations?
I, I think it might be a little bit of both, but last year he played, with Brennan Armstrong and MJ Morris, and he seemed to do well with both of them. So I'm leaning more toward just kind of a sophomore slump. Um, but I do believe that probably plays at least a little bit of a factor.
And then flipping to the other side on the defense, you've talked about consistency. The NC State defense has also struggled with consistency, giving up a lot of points in certain games. Is there a certain area you've pinpointed to why this defense hasn't really been performing that well of late?
Man, I wish I could pinpoint one. Um, I think I think the safeties, the secondary, I haven't been totally sold on them this year. Um, I think part of it is injuries. I know Devin Boykin has been out all season, and he's been a leader for them in that room. Has a lot of playing experience, um, and so they don't have him, and that's really hard. Aiden White, great guy, great player. It's taken him a while to kind of get back into a rhythm, um, and they've given up some really big plays that I just in years past it's like okay maybe they would have given up one or two of those, but it's like a lot every game. The defensive front has been really inconsistent too. Like I go on the big plays tab on stat broadcast and it's they cannot stop the run for whatever reason, and I truly don't get it. Uh, Doran said that he wasn't going to switch to a, you know, 4-4-3-4 or 4-4-3, right? Am I doing the math right? um, and I don't know if that's the best call personally. I know he's had all of this experience, so he probably knows best, but I mean, they don't have an elite linebacker like they did in Peyton Wilson or in any of the guys that came before him. And when you don't have that, it just puts that much, words are hard. It puts that much more pressure on your D line. And I just, I just don't know what they're doing. And I question the decision making here. Um, because yeah, that's an issue too. Everything is an issue.
Do you think it's maybe some losing of them seniors? That's why the defense has dropped off. Because last year, NC State, they were one of the better defensive teams in the ACC, but this year they're not one of the worst defenses in the conference.
Yeah, I definitely do think that played a different or played a role, but I mean, man, there's still several like really experienced guys that I am surprised it is so inconsistent and it has been so bad at times. Because I mean, you would think, and basically, you go back to ACC kickoff, and they were like, "Yeah, we're really offended that people think we're going to be like mediocre or bad because we lost Peyton." And it's like he's not the whole defense, which is true, but they have not backed up that statement at all. So maybe maybe Peyton and Savion Jackson and guys like that. Maybe they should have been what's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know. Maybe they should have been taking some lessons and maybe remembering them, because right now it's not good.
And one of those veteran pieces that is on that defense still is Devin Van, and he has, he's been, inconsistent, I guess you could say, is kind of the theme of NC State. But how important is he as a leader, not only on the defensive side, but really this whole team?
Yeah, they love Davin. He is a guy that it seems like everyone loves him. It doesn't matter what position they play, how much they play with him. He's a guy who he balances being very kind and very encouraging with some tough love and accountability. I've seen him yelling at guys, telling them to get it together. And so even though he may not be the guy filling up the stat sheet, there is a level of, I think he's probably one of the more consistent guys, actually, just because he's not leading the team in tackles or anything. The pressure that he can put on opposition has been a really big deal. And the leadership and the example that he's shown for what toughness should look like has been huge. And I think him coming back this year was key. I think they would have been even worse had he foregone this last year, because he does a lot of stuff that maybe doesn't go or doesn't get recognized. And the team is far better with him on it.
And then, one of the positives for this defense is they are getting quite a few turnovers. They're they're getting the other team to turn the ball over quite a few times. Is that something the offense then needs to be more productive on and getting when those turnovers do happen and scoring off those? Or is it just a matter of the defense continuing to help the offense in that way?
I think it's a little bit of both. Um, because last week the defense had two straight turnovers that the offense didn't do anything with. And I know Tim McKay, he's one of the older offensive linemen. He was like, we were pissed off after that. Because, then they went and scored. They scored. But he's like, I think we should have been more pissed off after the first one that we didn't capitalize on. And so I think they recognize how hard the defense has been working for them, even when it hasn't been perfect. And yeah, I think there's some frustration and some disappointment within the offensive groups of, they've done this for us. We really need to step up for them too. So yeah, I think it's both. I think the defense is going to have to create more of those opportunities because of just the struggles that the offense has had. Just give them more opportunities to hopefully make something work.
And then now previewing, this game on Saturday, Syracuse is coming off a close win over the 25th team in the country at the time, UNLV. NC State coming off a close loss to Wake Forest. Where is the mindset right now with this NC State team after a really close loss to Wake Forest last week?
I think it's a must win for them, because otherwise they are starting ACC play 0-3, which hasn't been done in a decade. Fans are not happy. I mean, there are the tried and true that are like, okay, we can do this, whatever. But at least on social media, they're brutal. Let me tell you. And I also think at that point, they say there's so much to play for still, but at that point, you're out of ACC championship contention. Because at this point, other teams could still fall apart. But once you get 0-3, you're pretty much done. And college football playoff, yeah, I think they'd need to win out, really, to get even a half decent bowl, because right now things are looking really, really bad. And I think they were embarrassed last week. They've had several games where they say that they felt embarrassed by their performance, or at least part of it. I think they want to make a statement. Whether or not they will is a whole other question, but I think that's what they want.
For them to make a statement, what's the one thing that needs to go well? Is it on the offense? Is it on the defense? Is there one thing that needs to go well for NC State to make that statement victory this weekend?
I think it has to be defense. They have got to play together. They have got to play um, really aggressively. They got to stop the run. I know I've seen clips of LaQuint Allen. That guy is good. Obviously Kyle McCord is a very talented QB. He knows how to make reads and find his receivers. And obviously Syracuse has competent guys downfield who can make those plays. And so defense has got to disrupt that. Otherwise, the offense has no way of keeping them. I really don't believe that it's got the firepower. And so yeah, that's the biggest key for me. And I think again, getting back to punting, Caden Newcastle needs to be a little bit more consistent because he can flip the field really, really well if he's on. And he just has not been there all the time. And I'm not really sure why.
So last question for you before I let you go. Predictions. You'll be there on Saturday. Which way are you leaning midway through the week and how this game will go?
Well, I think Syracuse is gonna win. I do. Just based on everything I've watched, they got pushed around by Western Carolina. That was not great. Got pushed around for a little bit by Louisiana Tech. So I definitely think Syracuse is gonna win. I couldn't tell you a score. I They could score 30, they could score, 3. I have no idea, but I'm not super confident in the Wolfpack.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time, and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely.